Kia ora everybody, my name is Paul Evans. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Chief Executive of ACE New Zealand. It's my great pleasure to welcome you along to another ACE webinar where we aim to bring you first-class speakers addressing topical subjects. Now, for those of you who haven't been on one of our webinars before, you're all muted at the moment to cut down on line noise. However, if you've got a question, a comment, or something you want us to clarify, you can ask a question at any time. I'll be posing these to Ben as we go through, so you don't need to hold off to the end. As it comes to your mind, just fire them through. So to do that, type it into the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. And as I said, I'll put that to Ben as we go. And just be aware that we are recording this webinar and we'll be sharing it with all of you afterwards. Now, today's webinar is how to develop a client-centric personal brand with Ben Paul. You've probably heard about personal branding, but what does it really mean and why do consultants need to consider it now more than ever? In this webinar, Ben is going to help you understand what your personal brand is, decide what offline activities you should do, understand the importance of engaging content and how to deliver it, and LinkedIn Social Networking 101 for consultants. So our presenter today is Ben Paul. He's the Managing Director of BD Ladder. He has over 20 years experience in providing sales and marketing advice with an emphasis on professional services. Ben's specialist coaching and mentoring skills are sought after by a range of clients in different sectors. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. As Paul mentioned, these are the contents we'll be covering today. I'm not going to talk you through them because they were all just said there by Paul. But we'll start off with, why do consulting engineers need a personal brand? Quite simply, you need your own personal brand because people actually buy your expertise beyond your own company brand. It's important that they get to know you, understand what expertise you bring, what services you offer, and have trust and value in you. These days, it's not enough just to rely on a central marketing machine. It's great if your company has one, and if that works for you and it builds your brand, it will make life a little bit easier, but it still won't differentiate you, and it won't let people understand what it is that you do. The market really understands what you stand for and what you do, and that's what your personal brand is. It's who you are, what services you offer, what makes you unique, and what you stand for. Quite often, having that personal brand is also really, really important, particularly if you're in a bigger organisation. If we're honest, we're in those big organisations, and I had the joy of working at PwC London for a period of time, you don't actually know those 4,000 people in that organisation, or some of the larger 2,000 organisations here, what they do. So to be able to do cross-selling and refer internally is really important. If you have a personal brand, it will help get you noticed. It will also help your career development, give you industry recognition, and it increases that chance of that glorious thing that we love in the sales environment of inbound inquiries and referrals. If people see you as an industry leader, someone who knows their stuff, a source of information, they're more likely to contact you as and when they require that service, which makes it a lot easier and a lot cheaper to win new work. So it really is a potential differentiator to have a personal brand. Here's a great example of someone who has a personal brand and a pretty healthy company, although they've had some difficulties during COVID, of course. If you look here at the number of followers that Richard Branson has, and it's even hard to even say that amount of number of people, compared to the amount of followers that his company has, it's exponential, because people will actually follow people because they have opinions, they're real, they're interesting. It's far more engaging to follow someone than an actual company. Here's a last example of why it's really good to have a brand and what brands are for, and when you relate it to your personal self. There's 3 pictures of trainers there. 2 of them are well-known brands, and one of them is a non-branded running shoe. If you're about to undertake running a half marathon, a marathon, or some big running exercise, or just to start to join the gym, and you wanted to get the best shoes because you didn't want to get hurt, ask yourself, when faced with this choice in the shop, which one would you pick? The brands you know and you're familiar with, or the brands you don't? The more people are exposed or see or understand what it is that you do, the more familiar they'll get with you. Familiar breeds a form of trust, and they're more likely to select you. So now, if you put that into the world of consulting engineers, if someone's there making a choice once you've submitted a bid or proposal, and they see a group of engineers, three of which are active in the marketplace, they see commenting, they see writing articles, they see speaking, and they know what they stand for, and they believe they're experts in what they do. And the other two are a collection of people where they're not sure who they are, they haven't seen them before. From a client point of view, when you're making that decision, it's much easier and more likely you will choose those ones that you're familiar with, that have a strong personal brand allied to the brand of their company.
Hey, so Ben, I've got a question for you. You said there to not rely on that big central marketing machine. But if you're in a big firm, there will be a big central marketing machine. And if you're somebody who's working in that, how do you, as an organization, support and enable your people to develop their own kind of brand and voice?
Yeah, look, that's a really great question. I think the two shouldn't be mutually exclusive. If you've got that channel that's coming through with the central marketing, you'll need great content, and that content really is in a consulting sense, it's your people. So allowing them to have that flexibility to air things sensibly and talk about issues of the day, while they should be shared by that individual, they should also be shared through those company channels as well, because that just allows that brand, that personal brand and the company brand to align and get out to a much bigger audience.
Absolutely. And in terms of that, how do you, as an organization, how do you balance your organizational brand with the opinions of your employees, right? And how do you get that balance right?
You would hope that when you create a company culture, that those opinions would be aligned to those of the organization. You certainly don't want to set up too much of a police state, but at the same time, if someone's putting out opinions which aren't good to your clients and those you're trying to work with, then you would definitely have to have that conversation around the appropriateness of what they're saying. But I think it comes down to empowerment and trust of your people, with some clear guidelines of what we can talk about, what we should talk about, and making that clear to them. And if there's any areas of grey, ask them before they post something to come and talk to you and just have that sensible conversation, whether it's your leadership team or your central marketing team, just to make sure that nothing untoward is going out to market.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks, Ben.
The next thing to know for everyone is to understand what your personal brand actually is. This is as simple as, what do you want to be known for? What is that X factor that what people think and differentiate you for? So when people think of you, what do you want them to think? Do you want them to think that you can help them with something, or that you are a great source of information on it? Really take some time, note down, think about the things that you want people to think of when they think of you. A great place to start is actually ask people in your organization what they think of you, how they perceive you professionally, what they see as it is that you do and what sets you apart. Ask others, colleagues, friends, those in your network, how they would describe what you do, how you do it, and what makes you different. It's really important to start thinking about what it is you want to be known for and want the market to be known for, because then you can actually tailor what it is you put out to the market so it aligns with that and starts creating that personal brand.
Hey, on that, Ben, a really interesting one is you'd said ask people within your organization kind of what you're known for. Can you use a personal brand to also grow your visibility, people's awareness of what you do actually within your organization? Obviously, if you're in a small firm of 10 to 20 people, you know everyone there, you know what they do. But if you're in a big organization which has 3, 4, up to 2,000 people, you're not going to know everyone in that organization. You're not necessarily going to know what they do. So is there almost an internal marketing element to that as well?
I absolutely think there is. And I think actually the act of asking people what they know you for might be good in the smaller organization where they probably are aware. If you go wider and ask some people who you're less familiar with, in a bigger organization, you may become brutally aware that actually they don't really know what it is that you do. And that's one of the barriers to missing opportunities for a lot of consulting organizations when they go out to market. They're just not aware that they offer those services or have those niche options within their armory. And if they do, they're not sure who to direct their client to when it comes up. So it's absolutely vital that, you know, your army of 1,500 or whatever it is in a big organization are completely aware of what you do, because they'll be the people that can actually help promote your brand further, because it helps benefit their client.
Yeah, great. And look, I've also got a question there in terms of, and I've talked to a few kind of consultants around this, and they sometimes see this stuff as shameless self-promotion, to quote one. And there's one that I always kind of come back to, and it's there's an equation around trustworthiness, and I think it's credibility, reliability, and intimacy over self-orientation. And so that's saying, you know, sure, talk about these things, but don't talk about yourself too much. How do you get that balance right?
Right. So yeah, that's David Maister's equation on trust from the Trusted Advisor, which is, if people haven't read it, is a book that is a must read for everyone. I think the reality is it's what you put forward as your brand, because it's not, we're not asking you to say, I am the best consultant because I've won awards, or I am amazing because of this reason. It's because you're giving people opinions or information or educational stuff that's actually really useful to them. So what you're posting should be helpful. If you're doing a seminar, if you're doing a webinar, you're giving away some education, helping people with what they're trying to achieve. That's beneficial to them. It's less beneficial to you, so you've lessened the self-orientation. Obviously, demonstrating that you know your stuff and you're completely aware of all the issues in whatever topic you're talking about will bring that credibility. And, you know, having those opinions or sharing what's important and being open and honest enough to talk about the issues or things that are slightly contentious, that they're the issues people want to talk about. That shows that you're aware of what's important to them. But you should always have your personal brand in mind of the client rather than yourself or your target audience if it's internal.
Yeah, I think that your point there around contentious issues, and obviously you need to kind of approach those carefully and sensibly. But I think often within particularly larger organizations, there's this, we'll stay away from anything kind of scary, and that results in shades of grey, and no one really engages with shades of grey, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And look, there's a lot going on in this sort of field in the current marketplace with shovel-ready projects, and there's a lot of talk being in the marketplace, and those who can meaningfully engage and talk about that. And it doesn't have to be a case of we need to get this going because we're going to lose jobs and we're waiting. It can be kind of a case of, look, this is a great initiative. We understand there's blockages. Here's a few opinions that we've got which might help unblock those and get the market moving for the benefit of not us, but for the benefit of New Zealand and everyone in the economy. So it's having that ability to talk about those things and offer options and solutions and opinions. They don't necessarily have to be contentious, but they can be interesting. And that sort of thing that journalists pick up on, that sort of thing that your clients will pick up on, because they're looking for help in these areas.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
So the first thing to do, there's two different types of way you can build your personal brand, and they're what we call offline and online activities. Quite simply, offline is any activity that doesn't require you being on the internet. So use of icons here. Radio advertising is one that people will do to build their own brand and their personal brand. Actually proved to be very effective, particularly during lockdown. It was a great way of getting to people. You'll have noticed, actually, if you listen to a few of the news radio stations, a lot of digital marketing agencies and those who do search engine optimization are actually using radio. I think the reason for that is the people they're trying to target are not that au fait with what they do, but they know that they need it and want to use digital marketing, so they're more likely to engage with radio and then book that meeting. So it's actually quite clever, even though you would think they would be using their own online channels. There's also public speaking, whether you run your own events or seminars, or if you get on the speaking circuit and go at conferences. That's a really effective way to get your message across and engage with clients and potential audience. Studies have shown that's one of the most effective ways of actually getting people to contact you. If they see you as authoritative, someone who knows their stuff, and also because it's very personal, when they're looking around and thinking of it, it resonates in their mind. They remember seeing you. They're more likely to pick up the phone and feel comfortable or drop you an email because they actually feel like they know you. Then there's calls or meetings with your clients, which is an offline activity, actually picking up the phone and making a contact. Really, really effective. Obviously, for the introverts, that can feel a little bit scary, picking up that phone and making those calls, but those one-to-one contacts ultimately the ones that will lead to the most success, because you'll get to understand them and be able to consult to them. You can actually do letters and snail mail. That does still exist and can be relatively effective, as people tend not to read emails these days, but they may get less posts, so they may be more open to receiving that. Again, it would need to be good and targeted though, like any communication. Then there's getting published in actual print. So rather than online, getting published in journals and magazines that are print only can be very effective. Those people who subscribe to print magazines, and there are less of them these days, admittedly, are the sort of people who will sit down and read every article. So that means there's more chance that actually you will sit down and engage with your content, as opposed to sort of click on, click off. Sometimes they can do with the online stuff. And finally, there's just joining members organizations like this one and other ones in the industry. That gets you a chance to show what you do, understand, and make contacts on a one-to-one basis. So they're all really good offline activities. The key to picking which ones you decide to use is really understanding who you're targeting, which ones they're most likely to engage with, and try and engage with them, rather than what some people tend to do, and it's very easy for us all to do, is to try and pick the ones that we most enjoy doing. So bear that in mind. Try and think about what your target audience would engage with most. Which then moves us on to the opposite of that, which is online activities. The first one lots of people talk about, I do a great deal of this myself, which is writing articles or blogging. So getting your message across by sharing content that hopefully helps people, gives them some advice, shares an opinion, maybe gives them some hints and tips, things that actually help them with what they're trying to do. I think sometimes there can be reluctance among some consultants to feel like they're giving away secrets. But I think if you give away some information that allows people to progress it, when they are progressing and feel like they need help, they're more likely to call you because they see you as someone who will try and help them, rather than someone who's just trying to sell their services to them. The next one is vlogging. So that might look like the YouTube one, but vlogging being videos. More and more online platforms are showing a preference towards video content over long form written content, which can be quite scary and confronting for quite a few of us. But video done well brings that personal touch to people. It conveys a message quite quickly. And I suspect this has even been heightened by lockdown. People are more comfortable with sitting there, particularly as they're working from home, watching a quick 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute video, getting the information they need, and then carrying on with their work. LinkedIn I'll come back to, but that's obviously the biggest social networking platform, but there's other social media out there as well. And we've got Twitter there as well. Twitter's a really good source for people to get short, sharp messages out there that are timely and are relevant in a newsworthy way. If you're trying to get attention of journalists and news agencies, they will follow Twitter. So it's a good way to build your brand there. On the left, webinars, like we're doing right now. Rise in popularity of webinars. Great way of getting a captive audience. You can obviously record it and it gets shared out as well. And it's a great way of sharing information. And finally, ebooks. So if you're doing some more thought leadership, or if you're going to get some surveys together and get some content out there, they can be really, really effective ways of communicating. It's a bit longer format. People will exchange their emails in exchange for getting that ebook, which then opens up the chance for your marketing department to use their email marketing effectively and build lists for all the activities that you do.
Just
sorry, Paul. Yeah.
No, just kind of picking up on your point around Twitter. It's a really interesting one because Twitter can obviously be a sensational waste of time.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you can use a lot of time on it. But one thing I would say is, particularly with journalists and politicians, and particularly politicians, right? If you write an email to a politician, it goes into their inbox with 1,000 other emails. It gets screened by their staff, and maybe if you're lucky, you get a response in about a month's time, and it might be, a canned response. But particularly, some of our politicians, if you send them something on Twitter, you get a response in like an hour. It's quite remarkable. Hey, I was just wanting to ask you, Ben, in terms of some of that offline stuff, particularly around articles in newspapers, op-eds, and those sorts of things. It's not something a lot of our members do. I've seen one person, a guy called Dr. Fergus Tate out of WSP, does a great job. I'm sure he's got a marketing team behind him who does it. He's come out with some great op-eds around Vision Zero and approaches to road safety and those sorts of things, where he actually expresses an opinion, right? And that's where what media are looking for. But my observation is oftentimes consultants and engineers seem nervous about expressing opinions for fear of annoying someone. You've obviously got experience in the engineering sector, but also kind of more broadly. Can you kind of comment on that from your other professional services experience?
Look, I think when you target that, you've got to really think about the right person to do it. The person who's, as per your example there, is happy to give something a bit more meaty, and time to it, and a regular opinion. And it helps if they're looking at a particular sector that's relevant at that time, that they are free to talk on. And obviously that would need clearance from up above. And usually, from having been in those conversations, it's relatively easy to work through and get to that point. But the impact of being in a regular publication or in print actually is quite high. I just get the feeling that when people do buy, say, an MBR or actually buy a physical Herald, they're actually more like to sit down and read it and engage with it, or a trade magazine, because they'll sit there with a coffee and they'll take that time out and flick through, and then the articles that catch they'll actually read. And the pickup rate's quite good. I know from experience myself of writing directly in a trade magazine that was actually printed, at the time thinking, well, this is no good, I can't really share this article. But actually I got the most amount of incoming referrals from it, probably because people read it more thoroughly than they would do with other stuff, and it maybe there's an added credibility factor to something actually being in print. It feels like it's a bit more unique or worthy.
Yeah, I agree with that, because like it's really easy to have an opinion online nowadays. You know, some things like LinkedIn, which we talk about, anyone has that opportunity. Being published in an actual newspaper, and I've got a kind of similar experience. I wrote, I reached peak middle age because I wrote a letter to the editor probably about 2 months ago, right? And it got published in the Herald as the main letter, and I had more feedback on that hard copy thing than I have on many posts that I've written, or you know, all sorts of other platforms. So it is really interesting, these things which we sometimes think is a little bit outdated and their day has passed, how they can still have a significant impact depending on who your audience is.
Yeah, look, and I think, you know, you only have to look at Richard Conway, who's the owner of Pure SEO. I mean, he's got a regular feature in M2 magazine. Now there's a guy who's got digital business, but he's writing in a magazine that isn't, unless you're a subscriber, doing it online. So actually, that medium is really powerful to reach out to people, because it gets delivered and lots of people read it. So it used to be in the airport lounges as well. So it's quite a clever way of getting across.
Absolutely.
So why do we need great content? And it's not just because Spider-Man will stop what he's doing and saving the world to engage with a book, but because as humans, we really do engage with great stories. We're programmed to respond to stories from early childhood all the way through now. If people can provide you with great content, help you with what you're trying to do, give you the information you need in a nice, clear, succinct way, you're really going to engage with it. And that's what we want to try and do with our clients. So there's a reason why most people invest heavily in their content marketing these days, whichever medium they use. And that's why it's really, really important. And it's really important in building the personal brand, because it's how you get your message across. It's how you get people to understand what it is that makes you unique, and what you stand for, and what sets you apart. So how do you actually do this? How do you get that content? How do you start? For a lot of people, we're not necessarily born as trained journalists. We're engineers first, consultants first, not necessarily authors or people who want to sit in front of the camera. So to break it down, the first thing to do is understand, link to your brand and your clients, is to get a topic for something you want to talk about. Think about what that topic is. The next thing is to think about why it's relevant. Why would someone want to engage with this topic? Most importantly, who's it relevant to? Who's actually going to read it? Think about your audience. And I think that's really, really clear. Those who do it well, particularly in the professional services realm and the engineering realm, for those who think about their audience. If your audience is the CEOs or those within a business who aren't necessarily your technical buyers, but those who will have influence on large scale projects, they're unlikely to engage in content that's of a technical nature. They're more likely to engage with content that explains what can be done, explains the benefits of a project and what the outcomes will be and how you can get there, rather than the nitty gritty of how it's actually done from an engineering perspective. That's not to say that that content doesn't have a place. If you are writing to a technical audience, or you do want to put something in the journal, then absolutely that should be there. But it just changes the tone of what you write and how you write. I think it's often been said that great content is when you take a complex idea and it can then be explained so that anyone of a reasonable business intellect can understand it. That's great writing. The last thing to think about this in engaging content is, what's your opinion? What unique angle do you have that would make someone actually, one, want to read on, and two, would get them to understand what you stand for and what your personal brand is. And when you come to writing it or crafting your content, the first thing to do is plan a clear structure. So we're trying to avoid that Kiwi yeah, nah, and where we're going, but have a clear path forward and a clear signposting all the way through. First, start with a killer headline. particularly now, and you don't have to go clickbait on this, but people are bombarded through LinkedIn, through other media channels. So headlines are really important. If something catches your eye straight away, you're more likely to read on. So the headline is really important. Take time on it, try and think about it. Then look at your introduction. The tip here is get to the point fast and make it clear what the reader will get from reading on. People are time poor. They want to actually know when they invest time in reading your article, what they will get from that, what the benefits are, what they'll learn. I would then say go straight to the conclusion. What is the main takeaway? What will that person be left with at the end of reading your article? What's the last impression you want them to have? What are you going to hammer home that point with? What do you want them to leave with? Is that impression of your personal brand? And then write that middle section. You can always adapt the conclusion at the end once you've written the middle section, but you've got that nice structure in place. Put the main points in. Use short paragraphs as much as possible. 150 to 300 words tops is ideal. Lots of headings. It's great if you can break up your writings with headings and have sections. It makes it a lot easier for someone to read. And don't be afraid of using bullet points. It really does make it a lot easier and much easier for someone to engage with, read all the way through. If you're looking to optimize it for search engine optimization, anywhere from 750 words up to 2000 is around about what the algorithms are currently looking for. That does change from time to time. I would urge you to write great content first and worry less about keywords and search engine optimization. That can always be added later if you need to with your marketing team. Final point, get it independently proofread. If you've got someone there who can read it for you, fantastic. It's really hard to proofread your own work. There's a reason why all the great writers like J.K. Rowling and stuff have an editor. They go through and find the gnarly mistakes and the little typos. In your audience, there's two types of people. There's the grammar Nazis and the non-grammar Nazis, for want of a better expression. But those people who really are particular on grammar and spelling will not engage with your content or your personal brand if they see those mistakes. If you can't find someone to proofread it, there's a couple of tools you can use. Grammarly is a great one, which you can download online. Or you can also go to the Hemingway app online and you can put your content in there and it will mark it for grammar, but also readability.
I think that point around Grammarly is a great one, Ben, because obviously you can download the free version, which picks up my pet peeve, which is people incorrectly using possessive apostrophes.
Yes.
So obviously I'm one of those people that you mentioned. But also if you go for the paid version, which is relatively cheap as well, it gives you a readability score. It makes recommendations. It tells you when you're using, because we've all got our go-to words that we use way too much.
Yes.
And it tells you when you've done those. So some great little tools in there. Just a reminder, folks, you can type through your questions at any time. This is your opportunity to pump Ben for all of his knowledge. In terms of that kind of, you said around, the length of paragraphs and those sorts of things. Is there space for kind of different lengths of content? Really, really short stuff, really, longer form stuff. How do you kind of differentiate between when to use those?
I think it depends on the topic, and there absolutely is. I think sometimes if you can say something really well in 300 to 500 words, don't try and add more. If you can answer the question or whatever the topic is, then don't just keep writing for the sake of writing for the idea of hitting some magic number. I think 350 is about the minimum that Google will rank a page if you're doing it digitally, so you need at least that many words. But other than that, I wouldn't say add too much. If it's a really weighty piece of thought leadership and it's got good comments in it, and maybe if you're using statistics or you've got surveys in there and there's some weighty grunt to it, then as long is really, really fine. I think the key is probably to, if you're doing a lot of this kind of stuff, is to mix it up. So not have one set length, but have whatever length is required. And you'll notice on articles that are shared on LinkedIn and other places now, it gives readers a kind of time estimate on how long it takes to read.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and I kind of find you might have a big crunchy piece of content, right? That your nerds, like me on a particular subject, if it's a subject I love, I'm happy to go in and read for 20 minutes. But understanding if you're posting that to LinkedIn, that you need a really good summary around why the heck people would actually dive into that, and how can you use graphical content or infographics to kind of pull out those key elements.
Yeah, look, absolutely. People want to know what they're investing their time in, and people will read longer content, and actually they tend to actually read more longer content if it's good and there's a reason to, and it's clear what they'll get out of it early on. Sometimes the shorter content almost isn't enough, so they kind of switch off. But
And I think your point there around what are they going to get out of it, making that point really explicit is important, because and this is not a criticism in our sector, and a lot of content I read, a lot of reports I read, we're really good at burying some incredible data and outcomes right in the middle of a dense piece of text. And if you read through it all, you're like, wow, this is phenomenal. But how the hell would anyone know to get there?
Absolutely, and it's quite interesting that some of those great data and stats are buried deep into the content, almost hidden away. The thing that is most shared and picked up by journalists, other news agencies, is actually good grunty statistics. People like them and they make sense, and you can relate to them and you can actually see what it means, and you can get some industry knowledge.
Yeah. Well, look, I can kind of comment on that firsthand. Is everyone loves a good chart, right? I like sharing charts and graphs, and the level of engagement that you get around those compared to just written content is, a massive difference.
Absolutely. So coming into the final part now, LinkedIn social networking 101 for consultant engineers. I think we don't have to labour too much on this. There's some stats here that I borrowed from a LinkedIn presentation I attended a couple of weeks ago. Look, it's most people are now aware it's not a job seekers platform. It's far more than that. It is a social networking platform. People engage with it. Most people are on it. It's a business networking platform. One of the first things to do is to look at your actual profile as it stands now and get that up to shape, because when people are looking at you, they're looking at your personal brand, or even if they're about to meet you, well, the first thing they'll do is they'll Google you. When they Google you, it's most likely that your LinkedIn profile will come up first, even ahead of your profile if it exists on your company webpage. LinkedIn is that strong a platform that actually it's likely that your profile will appear from there first, and they'll look at that. Some people even now just go straight into LinkedIn and look you up there. It's important to get a good headline. Just having your job title, while it's fine, might not be the best thing for you. It's a tag that follows you around. So every time you comment or interact with a piece of content, if someone then will see you, that headline pops up. So you can see there's an example of something of my one, and it's clear what I do and who I help. But I've also looked a little bit through some of my connections and some of the other ones I've noticed on LinkedIn the last few weeks ahead of this, just to give you an idea of the kind of sort of things that you could look at as a consultant engineer, what might make sense for you. Here's some of the good ones that I've seen. I'm not going to read them out to you. You can clearly read them yourself. But they make it clear how that person helps, what market they're in, and why you might want to engage with them. So straight away, it's part of that storytelling and engagement. It means you're more likely to click in. Someone's more likely to look at your profile and potentially try and connect with you. The next thing is your about page. So one of these is true and one of these is made up. The first one is not a particularly good one, so I've sort of made that up and used my own name just to make sure it's clear. I didn't want to embarrass anyone, but you may be sitting there with an about here that reads something like the first one: a civil engineer with 25 years experience. Ben has worked on many large projects in New Zealand. Ben is director for Acme Engineering, blah, blah, blah. Firstly, it's very vanilla. Secondly, I'm talking about myself in the third person, which isn't great. It's a social networking platform, so think of it like a networking event. We should always talk in the first person, so I am would be a better start. But the second one is real, and if you read that there, I'm not going to say who it is, but it's really, really compelling. It's actually telling a story that makes you want to read on. So when you click on this person's profile, you want to engage what it is. You want to read on, you know what they do. It's got passion. I love the line in the start, second paragraph, sorry, I make streets all over the world and it's the best job ever. It's just really compelling. You want to talk to this person. So what I'd urge you to do after we finish this session is to look back and look at this and see how you can improve your profile. Fill that about section.
Sorry, Ben, I was just going to say, it's really funny, and this is not a setup. Reading that, I know exactly who that is because I've read that before. And correct me if I'm wrong, is that Steve Burgess?
It absolutely is, yes.
Yeah. So I don't know Steve, but I've read a bunch of his kind of thoughts on LinkedIn, and I remember reading that. So it just it speaks to how powerful that is.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And look, as you go through the rest of your profile, and there's lots of guides on how you can fill this stuff up, and I don't want to spend all our time talking about that today. It's important where you've got your current company things to actually put some information there about what you do in your current company and fill those boxes, and people actually know what you stand for and what you've done at every organization, your achievements. But this about is really about, the first line should be about your market or who you help or telling a story. This is, as you say, Paul, one of the best examples I've actually seen. I'm lucky that I do know Steve from a few years ago, but you know, this is him to a T, and he's got a great personal brand out there. But just doing your personal profile on LinkedIn isn't enough. It's not a case of spray and walk away and everyone will start coming now and find your profile. You actually have to do a lot more, but the first step is to get your personal profile right, so when people look you up, they know where you are. And the reason you have to do a lot more is LinkedIn is actually what they call a gamification platform. That means the more you put in, the more you get out. It runs algorithms, it knows who the active users are. The more active you are, the more likely what you do will get shared on a wider audience. It's also running algorithms a little bit like a dating agency. So if you start commenting and connecting with one person in particular, it will start to realize that you have a bond. If they start to connect back and like your stuff, you'll start to see more of each other's stuff in your feeds, because it will think that you two are like-minded and aligned. So it will actually start running that in the background and start building your togetherness online, which is a great way of actually sort of networking, because it's working it out for you. Here's another stat from the same LinkedIn presentation I want. So this is their actual stat of their clients and what people actually do and how members use LinkedIn itself. Interestingly, there, most people are doing it for educational, informative, and relevant content to themselves, and a little bit to stay on top of latest trends. So people actually are engaging with content in LinkedIn professional services in a professional sense. So it's a great way to inform and educate and stay relevant with the market and build your personal brand. I'm sure a few of you will have seen these. These are what we call long form posts. Here's an example of one that I put up a couple of weeks ago. Again, we started with telling the story. We're trying to be a bit personable and a bit funny with our children. But what you'll notice there is the views of the post in the feed is well into the 2000s and still going. lots of interaction, lots of comments. I haven't linked out to any other websites in this long form post. I've just written something as a post, not an article. And when it appears in someone's feed, it has that read more. And I think that see more sometimes entices people to click on, particularly if the first few words are good. And the reason it doesn't link out to my website or anywhere else is actually LinkedIn is trying to keep users on its platform. So too much linking out to your website or other websites will actually mean your content travels less far because they're trying to keep all their users on LinkedIn. That's not to say you shouldn't share stuff and you shouldn't put links, because you absolutely should when it's the right time to do so as part of your personal branding effort. But this is a really good way of engaging with people and getting short, sharp messages out to the market. And again, a little bit like Twitter, you can do these ones quite quickly, so they can be quite timely and relevant to what's going on in the market in the current time. Then we've got articles. LinkedIn is a great place. You don't need your own blog page or whatever to actually get your audience to see the stuff that you do. And here's a couple of examples from within your sphere. I mean, most people in this country will remember Ludo Campbell-Reid, who used to work here. I mean, obviously we can't all get Rachel Hunter to guest on our blogs and make sure that everyone engages with it, but that's gone a long way. And then there's one more recently from John Maguire, who's over in Oricon in somewhere in Australia. I can't remember, it might be Brisbane. He's put one that's quite timely around COVID and lessons for engineers. As you can see there's 41 likes, so there's a lot of engagement on LinkedIn. It's really around getting these articles up. If you are going to do it, don't expect the first article to necessarily get huge amount of likes, and it's a good idea to ask your colleagues and stuff to get promotion and start liking it and to help it along. The more you do it, if you do a couple of months, the more articles you get out there, the more people will start looking for your content, the more engagement there will be. Here's a fun one. I don't know if anyone's noticed, they've now put up a option for you to run polls on LinkedIn. Again, these seem to be one of the newer features that actually, if you get a poll out there, people do engage with. They obviously like clicking buttons and seeing what it is. Interestingly enough, when we're looking at personal branding here, one I ran recently, it seems that more people interact with videos than articles, but articles are still strong, but videos are starting to lead the way. People are wanting to do there. And we don't know the result of the one that's I picked up today from Jake Hennessy, but he's already got 42 votes with a week left. So it's obviously, that's a really good example of how to use that. He said calling all marketeers is his first point. So if you call out the market you're aiming for, will give people a reason to interact with that poll. One thing you'll probably notice from both of these here is hashtags. LinkedIn is now using hashtags, so getting the right hashtags is quite important. People, and you can as well, within your LinkedIn profile and in your LinkedIn homepage, you can actually follow hashtags. So if you want to follow hashtag consultant engineers or hashtag engineering, you can absolutely follow that as a hashtag and it will try and feed you relevant content. But that also means that when you're posting content, if you want that market to see that, you use that hashtag and you can actually start promoting it to the right people within the LinkedIn platform. So hashtags are very, very powerful as well. Photos, more and more photos are getting more and more popular as people are actually posting events they went to, company events, seminars, site visits. Here's one from Auckland Transport that's had 187 likes and 6 comments. What's really important thing to note here again is that idea of clicking on. So if you use a group of 5 or more photos, it will say +4 or whatever it is in the corner, which means people are more likely to click on that to see more and more photos. So 1 photo, 2 photos, good, but if you can get past 5 photos, it will just give people more of a reason to click on and follow that through. Here's a good one. Tagging people is always a good way to start a conversation and give them some recognition, or in LinkedIn term, I think they use the word kudos. But if you here, I actually know Joel. I've picked up one of his articles and said this is a great article from Joel, and then it's obviously gone out. And the art of tagging him has allowed it to get more views of the post in the feed. But it can be as simple as saying, I could end this session today and say, look, I had a great time. I was really hosted superbly by Paul Evans, and he did a great job. Thanks, Paul. And if I put that up, it's quite likely that Paul's going to engage with that post and say, thanks, it was really great. I enjoyed hosting you. It was a great webinar. And that will just travel more and more, and it'll start to build a bond. And if me and Paul aren't connected on LinkedIn, it's quite likely that we would then connect on LinkedIn. So it's a good way of thinking about who you want to connect with, who your client is, and can you give them recognition for something on this platform to start that conversation. So just coming to the last part of this and wrapping up the webinar ahead of questions, the last part of social networking, I'm going to leave you with 5 practical takeaways and things you can do to start increasing your profile as soon as this call ends. If we learn anything from lockdown, it's that we do know that Kiwis and everyone in this country certainly does love a takeaway. First thing to do is build your influence. So send out sort of 10 to 20 invites to connect this week. When you go through, it's a good idea to go to that person's profile and then click connect, because that will give you the chance to add a message. It's far more likely, and it's pretty obvious, that if we send the reason to someone as why you want to connect, they're much more likely to connect with you. If you just fire off connections and hope they connect, it's a little bit unlikely. Next thing is, if you're not already doing it, is actually follow 3 hashtags. Start building the things of interest to you that are relevant. So pick a hashtag that's relevant to you and your industry, relevant to your clients. That will change your newsfeed in LinkedIn and start showing things of relevance to you, which will help you interact with content. LinkedIn has groups, and some of them are active and some of them aren't. So a good idea is to actually find 2 or 4 groups and join them. See what people are talking about, see what they're posting, and actually then start liking and commenting on those posts within those groups. Be an active member. Before you go in and push and publish your own content and your own posts, it's a good idea to comment and share and praise those posts that are on those groups. As a good advice for when you actually are commenting, it's good to say, thanks, I think that's a really great post. One extra thing to consider is this. So you're starting a good conversation and maybe broadening the conversation, but it doesn't have to be confrontational. Next thing's really easy, just start liking some posts, ones that are relevant to you. Again, that will build the algorithms and help you see things that are relevant. It's a really good way of starting to engage with some of your clients, and it doesn't take too long. Finally, or point 5, I would share 2 third-party articles. So go onto news websites or industry websites and share articles that aren't directly from your company. Start sharing things that are relevant. Obviously, you probably don't want to share ones necessarily from your competitors, but share ones that are newsworthy, that people will have an interest in, and put a comment about why that's relevant. And then share one from your company. It won't work well for you from going back to the self-orientation and credibility piece from the Meister equation. If you share too much content that's just about you and your company, people will think you're being self-promotional. If you can vary it up and share some other stuff of interest, people will see you as that source of information and start to understand what you stand for. As a final bonus, we did promise you 5, but we'll give you 1 extra one. Start commenting meaningfully on other people's posts. That really does start a conversation. Those conversations are the ones that will start to build your network, will get people to interact with you. Because the main aim of LinkedIn is still to get that call or that face-to-face meeting, now that we're allowed to have them again, so that you can build that rapport and start that normal sales process that you would go through to bring new clients on board. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, I thought it was really interesting there, the one around sharing third-party articles, articles from third party rather than just stuff from your own company. And it was interesting. I saw some data that backed this up where in client research, clients viewed that lawyers and accountants were really likely to connect them with other expert advisors and a broader
Mm,
range of opinions, where their view of consultants and engineers were they try to keep everything within their own company, and so it was that self orientation again, and
yeah.
so it just eroded from the overall customer experience and credibility of our
Mm.
sector because we tried to keep it all about us rather than being a little bit broader in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think people tend to switch off from messages which feel like they're banging the company banner too much from that person. Because if you only see them in the feed and all they're doing is pushing their own material or their own company, you start to question the relevance of it. So it's a balancing act. So it's quite good to mix it up and get into that discipline. And I have noticed that when I fall and foul, having just started a brand new business myself, you can always be a bit too promotional trying to get your own stuff out there. That actually the drop off in what people see on LinkedIn and read and engage with is quite high if you get too much on your own stuff. So it kind of keeps you honest as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just had what's this? The comments come through said, "Will you be receiving a copy of these slides?" Don't worry, folks. We'll be sending out a video of all this so you can steal all Ben's IP after this. No, absolutely. We'll be sharing that with you. I guess the key thing is, we want you to be able to start doing some of those things, and
Yeah.
especially those 5 points that Ben made. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions at the moment, please don't hesitate to send them through. And just a comment here, some really good ideas for mixing up the content on LinkedIn posts. Thanks very much. Hey Ben,
Yeah,
just
look,
on
if someone,
building your network, you kind of mentioned that, send out invites, make sure you add a message to that. Any other, I think that adding a message to it is absolutely critical because I don't know, like, I'll find if I do a post which is really, really, it has really good reach, I might get like 20 connection requests as a result of
mm,
it, right? And there'll be those
yeah,
people who go, they've actually written something and kind of invested some time, and I'll look at that and go, oh yeah, I really want to connect with them. There'll be a whole bunch of other random people who've just sent them through, and I guess my willingness to, to take the time to accept that rather than just letting them hang in there is lower. So how do you, obviously, he was writing a message, but how do you determine who you want to connect with?
um, firstly, you want to connect with people that are relevant to you. So you want to connect with people who you want to build a relationship with. So you start probably with the people you know. If you're new to this, you'd start with the people in your organization, people you know in the industry, people who you share member organizations with, all that kind of stuff. It's good if you've actually started commenting on people's posts, because then there's a shared interest. They'll know why you want to connect with them, and it makes that message easier. Or if you see something that's really well written and a good reason to that, you can say, hey, I really wanted to connect with you. I read something on there I thought was really good. I'd like to carry on the conversation. I think that's fine. And it's a good way to go. So you're already engaging with those people that you want to engage with. Like any networking, to make it successful, you want to network with intent. So you need to know the people that you want to connect with. To boost your reach, you can accept every connection and connect with as much of LinkedIn as you possibly can. But the reality is that will just be a huge amount of people seeing content that's not relevant and that they won't engage with, and it won't progress your brand or your reputation in any way at all. So it's a really good idea to actually know who your potential clients are, who your current clients are, and how you can connect with them on LinkedIn and build that profile. And it's a great idea to connect with people of influence on LinkedIn for your own career development, because it means you're always connected. So when they move company, you're still able to contact them because you're not tied to their email address, which leaves when they leave their organization.
Absolutely. Hey, we've got a question that's come through from Andrew, and it sort of looks a really good one. Said, a question about issues that may go against the client's position. How would you advise to get these points out there, or would you not?
Depends how strong that client relationship is and how they receive those kind of points, is the answer. And look, it's one that's having just stepped out of working at a law firm that you have to be quite careful of sometimes. I think you can give, if you really need to get those points out there, is you can talk about it in a different context if you can. So sometimes the current project or the current example might be quite contentious, but if you can link back to one from a few years ago and talk about lessons learned from that or what could have gone better on that, it can get that point out into the market without actually calling anyone out currently. So I think the best way to do it is not shy away from it, but necessarily look to try and be careful how you broach it and how you get there, because what you don't want to do is necessarily call out your client for a mistake or doing something in your opinion not quite right, when realistically you could broach it in a different way and still get the message out there.
Yeah, I kind of reflect on this, and it's a difference. I always think you don't necessarily want to be calling your clients out, and you should always operate on a no surprises basis, right? If you've got a problem with something they're doing, go and talk to them. That's probably the first thing. But I think, where there are things, you can ask a question. You can't, it's not necessarily going, hey, organization XYZ is doing a crap job. You could go, on this issue, are we doing enough? I don't think we, those sorts of, I think you can frame those up and have a really productive discussion. And my experience is that while people may not necessarily like those posts, they read them because they'll say, oh, hey, saw your post on that. What, so I think it's, you need to be sensible in the way that you broach those things.
Yeah, and it depends on the nature and the personality of your client. Some people actually quite like it and respect it. Others will run the other way as well and might end the relationship. So you do need a knowledge of that individual's preference and what they're likely to respond and how they're likely to respond.
Yeah. Hey, we've got a question here from Juliet. She says, hey, we have real difficulty in getting our engineers to engage with social media. Any ideas to make it more appealing for
them? Bribe them with sausage rolls? No, I think it's a case of trying to make, like anything that you're trying to get people to do, is what's in it for me? Why would they engage with social media? And I think what we covered off today gives some rationale around that. It's a really good way for them to potentially gain new clients and new work without having to do some of the harder stuff, which is some of the cold calling. So it's a way of networking and building rapport without having to put yourself out there in such a physical and sometimes challenging way. So social media can be a really good way for them to engage. If you're in a bigger organization, work with some advocates, so those who are more likely to engage with it. And then as the success stories build, you're more likely to find others will start coming along. So just as before I left my last place, we had a partner in a law firm who didn't even have a Facebook account, but suddenly had realized that they wanted a LinkedIn profile and asked us to help set that up and talk them through it and what it meant. And they were very fearful of it because they really didn't interact with anything social media at all. But they came to my team and asked them to help set them up. So it can be done, but they'd seen that it was valuable by talking to their colleagues and seeing that their colleagues had, built a profile and actually got some referrals and even some work out of using LinkedIn and other social media platforms. So it's all around showing that it works, working with those that are willing, and trying to bring those along board later, because you won't get everyone.
Yeah,
But
well,
make
look,
it
I
easy
think
for
that's
people.
a really good point, Ben, is you got to make it easy for them, and
Yeah,
you work with that coalition of the willing, right?
yeah.
Because there's some people who, if they're still doing all of their calcs on graph paper, then getting them to post regularly on LinkedIn is probably not the first step.
No, and look, sometimes I used to just send out, this is a really important announcement for our company. Can you always go to the company page and like it? Or this is an important announcement that your colleague sent out on LinkedIn. Can you go and support him or her and like it? And actually people said they quite enjoyed that, because it went to a link, they knew what to do. It was quite easy for them. So I think you can, from a central point of view, actually give them some clear instructions and make it quite easy. But don't ask them to do too much in that email, otherwise they'll click off.
Very good. Hey, so I'm just mindful of time, Ben. Any kind of final thoughts from you?
No, thanks for hosting me today. It's always good to talk to you and your members. For the person who did want the slides, if they feel brave enough, they can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to share them if I can find a way to send them through, because the large graphics are there. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions post this session, more than happy to answer them. Just get in contact. It should be relatively easy.
Very good. Hey, look, everyone, that brings today's webinar to an end. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us online today. Of course, I'd like to say thanks very much to Ben for sharing his insights with us. You'll be getting an email shortly, which will have a link to the recording of this webinar, so you can go back and kind of cherry pick out the bits that you liked. You can share that with your team. And as Ben said, jump on LinkedIn, send them a connection request, start taking those first steps. So thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you.